Okay, my dear students, today we shall start reading the first year course with the very first topic from prose, standing up for yourself. It is a very interesting one written by a Russian writer. So, till now you have some idea about English literature, some pieces, poems, prose pieces, plays written by English writers or Indian writers. Now, we will be reading an essay. It is just a kind of reminiscence that here the Russian writer, see the spelling Yevgeny, that is Evgeny, then Evtushenko, Yevtushenko. So, this is pronounced as Evtushenko. Right. So, this writer was a very famous and powerful writer, writing in those days, particularly when there was communist regime in Russia. Russia was then USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, a combination of so many states. Right. Now, it is presently it is Russia, has descended into several USSR and is no more there. But now, let us find out that what he is talking about. So, I have made my point clear that the title of this topic is Standing Up for Yourself. It is a long title, all right. So, it is derived, it can be best understood if you can just examine this standing up, the phrasal verb, stand up. So, the dictionary meaning is to defend or refuse to back down or remain solid under criticism. So, he says that how you can develop the habit of defending yourself. So, that he has learned as a life's lesson, and he has shared his feelings, his experiences as a kind of writer. All right. So, we shall go through the text, find for ourselves that how interesting is this one, and this has also got a very powerful lesson for all of us, those who are particularly students, and we are in you are in youthful stage. So, you must learn how to live. So, I should say this is a life's lesson. So, one should emulate the ideas which have been brought forth by this Russian writer. So, it is said that Evtushenko, you see the peculiar kind of pronunciation, Evtushenko, right. So, he was a revolutionary, a writer, a dramatist, a script writer, and a director of films, and also a very powerful poet. And it is said that he used to read his poems in public places. It is said that in 1961, he went for 250 number of poetry readings in public squares. All right, a revolutionary he was, and you see that how his ideas was somehow or other very significant, keeping in view the kind of a time in which he used to write. So, let us go through. So, he was alive during this 1933 to 2017, in 2017 died. So, the text starts, it has several sections, very short section, but in your text, in your book, no unit division is there, but you see this is the very first section of this topic. Let me read out part of it. You will see, mark the style, mark the person who is speaking, mark where the things are going on. So, the time, the place, and the characters. All right, three things you bear in mind so that it will be easier on your part to understand the prose. So, he says, in 41, I was living alone in an empty flat in a quiet Moscow street. So, from the very first line, you know in 41. So this is not the age of the poet, but in 1941. All right. So there should not be confusion that even if he has written this text when he was an old man, matured one, he is remembering his past days, but the reference is to time, that is time is 1941, not 41 as his age, but the year in which he had encountered such a kind of experience. I was living alone in an empty flat in a quiet Moscow street. So what is the place? It is Moscow. Who were the characters? The characters, let us start with, it is I. I means the author himself. All right. So this is a kind of autobiographical write-up. All right. That the writer is himself the character. He is talking about himself. He is telling you something about his experiences and about how he confronted such a kind of situation in 1941. All right. So there in a brief sentences, small sentences, he is telling, and we see that how one after another in a very systematic way he presents his you can say experiences. In 41 I was living alone in an empty flat in Moscow town. My parents were divorced and my father was somewhere in Kazakhstan with his new wife and the 2 children. I seldom received letters from him. My mother was at the front. She had given up her work as a geologist to become a singer and was giving concerts for the troupe. And my education was left to the streets. See, a very small sentence, but a very powerful sentence. That he is remembering, he is telling you what has happened in his childhood. Or it is a kind of, it was not a kind of childhood which was very pleasant. He says that when he was a child, he was left alone. Right? He was left alone. His parents were divorced. Right? His father was somewhere, his mother was somewhere, and he was alone. He was left alone. So, one can, you have had some experience, some kind of tales or stories around. You might have seen people or families or some friends who have come across such a kind of experience. But now you can compare those experiences or the kind of things which are hard with the story of this writer, who is in very candid terms, clear terms, is telling you what has happened to him, that it was a kind of bitter experience. He was left alone when he was a child. So, what was the age? In 1941, 1933. All right. So, you can calculate to find out that when he was only 8 years, all right, his parents were separated from each other. Mother was somewhere, father was elsewhere, and he was left alone. That's why he says that he had to live for himself. He was left alone in the streets of Moscow. My education was left to the street. The street taught me to swear, smoke, and spit elegantly through my teeth, and to keep my fists at the ready, a habit which I have to this day. So, my point is this, how beautiful it is written. It is almost like reading lines of a poem, of a particular poem, one after the other. Each line is important, each line is very powerful. So, he is, through these words, very simple words, he is putting forth his experiences. Experience was never pleasant, it was a bitter experience. So he says, as a child, I was left alone. My parents were nowhere. I didn't have anybody to share my feelings. So my education, what to talk about education? So the family life was somewhat, it was never a pleasant one. So his education was left to the streets. So what have he learned? He learned from the street, from the, you can say, the antisocials, the thieves, and the you can say all those persons, those who are moving are the street urchins. So that's why he says that what he has learned from the streets. My education was left to the street. So it is very easy to speak, but when he is telling you these things, it is mixed with the kind of a feeling, the reminiscence, all right, what he has remembered, how he is now a great poet, a great writer. But when he is going back in time, like a flash, you might have seen these things in films, that suddenly when you have the matured hero and then a kind of flashback, what this hero was some 20 years back. Likewise, you see that Evtushenko is telling you about his past days, about his young childhood days when he was only 8 years. The parents were separated, there was none in the house, he was left alone in the street. That's why he says, so it was difficult days only. The street taught me not to be afraid of anything or anyone. This is another habit I have kept. So he says that since he didn't have any family members, the parents were separated, no relation, nothing else. So whatever he has experienced, whatever he has learned, he has learned from his own experience, from his interaction with those people, the vagabonds, the street urchins. So he says that I have learned things in a very savvy manner. What is that? I have learned how to swear, how to smoke, spit. So these are some filthy habits, filthy bad habits, filthy habits. So he says, I have learned all the lessons from the streets. So there was no refinement, only crude things, all right? Bad things he has learned, crude, all right? Almost uncivilized kinds of things, how to spit, how to swear, and how to go for some kind of fighting. So all these things I've learned, and that was the rule of the street. That's why he says that my education was left to the street, and I have learned from those things, from the vagabonds, from the street urchins, these things. So it was never a kind of pleasant experience for me. So whenever he is remembering his past days, his childhood days, he is somewhat feeling very emotional and sentimental. I realized that what mattered in the struggle for life was to overcome my fear of those who were stronger. So it is almost like a theory, just like in a particular kind of a geometry, you have a kind of a theorem and you want to prove it at the end. In a conclusion, you say that whatever you wanted to prove, you have proved it. Likewise, you see the small piece standing up for yourself. They are your writer, a Russian writer who is remembering his old days, when childhood days, and he says that I want to prove this point. What is the lesson? The lesson is that in the life struggle, for life was to overcome my fear of those who were stronger. So two things should come to you. One is physical courage, the second one is moral courage. And he says, whatever I have learned from the streets. So since I was alone, I didn't have anybody to share my feelings. So I learned these things in a very evil manner. So street fighting, swearing, spitting, and calling names. So these were the things which I have learned. These are very uncivilized things, crude things, savvy things, savvy things, bad things, let us say. These are all bad things, but I have learned. And simultaneously, at the same time, I have also learned how to defend myself. All right? How to defend myself, protect myself, because there was none around me. No one is known to me. There was no relation around me to defend me. That's why I have learned from my childhood how to protect myself. So, this is the you can say the idea with which he has started, that as for education, formal education, it was left to the state. That means no education, formal education. Think of Evtushenko, such a great writer, but how emotional he has become when he is telling you about his past days, about his childhood days. You see that his parents were separated, mother was somewhere, father was somewhere, there is none around, he was moving in the street. So he was not sure about his food, not sure about his shelter, not sure about his schooling, not sure about his friends. So only thing what he has learned how to wave his hands and having giving, you can say, exchanging fists to each other, how to swear, how to spit, and going for some street fighting. And he says, possibly I have learned my lessons, how to live. This is life's lesson, practical, very practical. I have learned these things in a crude manner. Even though it is uncivilized, even though it is bad, even though it is crude, but he says, I have learned the hard realities of life, the hard realities of life, how to protect myself. So, this is the theory, this is almost the kind of lesson with which the first unit starts, and then a second. So, this is, if you can just remember, if you can visualize, just close your eyes, think of a person who is nearby, that you are with your family, you have brother, you have sister, your parents, all these things. Imagine someone who is there in the locality, who is moving here, begging alms, a beggar's child, not sure about his food, shelter, and nothing else, not very sure about how he would be just getting his food, day-to-day food and all kind of things. So, have a kind of comparison. Someone is protected, someone is not having any shelter, any protection. So, likewise it says that now when I am going back in time, just in films you have flashbacks, going back in time, likewise it says, when I remember my childhood, I am somehow to become very sentimental. Why? Those are the days when I learned all this art. So, art of living, this is another art of living. What is art of living? All these things which I have learned, it is through bad manners, in a shabby manner, in a crude manner, because none is there to protect me, none is there to share my feelings. So, that is why I learned these things, the hard realities of life from the streets. So, I did not have any formal education. My education was left to the streets, and I was there in moving in the Moscow street. So, he says this. In the second unit, let us come to the second unit. So, remember these things. Time is 1941. Place is Moscow street. Who is the character? Character is the author himself. That is why what he is talking about you have to believe, because he is the author, he has explained these things. That is why you say this is the story of Evtushenko, the writer. And now we will be talking about his opponent, that how a particular incident changed his life. All right? Till now he felt that it was very difficult to protect himself, because he was not physically that powerful, and he was just a child of 8 years. But one important day, one important encounter changed his, you can say, life's pattern. So, come to the second one, time, place, character, then add another character called Mr. Raid. All right? So, now in unit 2, you will be knowing something about this man. So, imagine, just see that in your place, in your own house, around some streets, in street corner, you might have seen some people, those who are moving there, either and thither. They don't have a kind of civic sense. they were just some of them maybe you can say cheats, some of them may be thieves, some of them may pickpockets. They were busy in doing things, and all of them they will be finding quarrels, they will be snatching somebody's you can say chain or that other kinds of. They were just the opposite kind of a thing if you consider yourself with them. So just the opposite kind of thing. Now you see, such a character was Mr. Raid. Alright, this so the equivalent, Odia equivalent will be Gunda. Alright. So you can say goon, or you can say in Odia we have the equivalent term called Gunda, a street fighter. Alright, a kind of a lawbreaker. So you can say he is a lawbreaker, a bully, a goon, whatever you can say. The Odia equivalent would be a street gunda. Alright. So he is your Mr. Raid. So see, Yevtushenko, your writer, is remembering, is now going to describe Mr. Raid. What he was looking like, what he was in those days. He was the ruler of her street, was a boy of about 16 who was nicknamed Raid. So the actual name is something else, but the people around in that locality used to call that young man as Mr. Raid. That was his nickname. Just like you are Mr. Suppose you have Pradipta, but in your circle you may be having a Tuna or Muna, that is your nickname. Likewise, the real name is something else, but he was named, he is popularly known as Mr. Raid. So he says that he was 16 years. The author was then only 8 years, and Raid was 16 years, very powerful built. So he was having like a remarkable figure. When he was moving along the street, he was moving just like a kind of you can say so-called dada. You have your Odia equivalent dada. Alright. So he is followed by, accompanied by his friends, accomplices. So see the kind of description how Raid has been described here by the author. Raid walked masterfully up and down our street, legs wide with a slightly rolling gait like a seaman on the deck. Alright. So imagine that way, that he was very powerful built, and he has a kind of wide chest, and he is somewhat you can say well structured body. He was up 16 years old, alright, almost kind of at the just approaching youthful stage, adolescent and youthful stage, and see that he was just the local, you can say goon, alright. He is a street fighter moving there, and people were afraid of him. So you see the kind of physical description which has been given by the poet. From under his cap, its peak always at the back of his head, his forelock tumbled down in a fiery cascade. Cascade means waterfall, right? And out of his round pock-marked face. So his face, so visibly it was not very pleasant. It is spotted kind of thing. Suppose it is the face of Mr. Raid. So you see hairs rolling down like, tumbling down like cascade, and very aggressive looking, wide chest, alright. And whenever he used to stand somewhere, he would be standing like this, legs wide open, just like this, alright. You see, powerful build, wide chest, pock-marked face, and he was always aggressive. And he is accompanied by his friends, alright. So see, imagine the context of the local gundas. Gundas having small gundas around. Likewise, you see, this is your Raid, who is a young man of 16 and powerfully built, he is physically very powerful, compared to this boy of 8 years. Raid could stop any boy and say impressively the one word money. So he is a snatcher. S-N-A-T-C-H. Snatcher. So whenever he is moving in the street, if he comes across anybody, he will be just confronting him, then he will just catch hold of him and snatches the money. All right, that's the kind of thing, that is his occupation. All right, that is his pastime, whatever you may call. He's a lawbreaker, and his friends who would be there, they would be helping him out of the situation. All right, whenever such a situation there, they help him that how to snatch money, snatch you can say valuables, and nobody in the locality had the courage to go against this local dada, or you can say local gunda, goon, Goon, goon. In Odia we say called gunda. So he says this is how raid used to look like, right? Cascade, so hairs are just like cascade like, and whenever he walks, the hair will be just waving like this, and whenever he used to stand up, he would be standing like legs wide open, a poke-marked fellow, aggressive looking, wearing a kind of cap. So you can best imagine the kind of physical appearance of that man. Very terrifying, very terrible. Everyone is afraid of raid, so was I. So admittedly, he was terrible. So no police, no one, and there he used to loot persons, those who be coming. Whenever he finds any person, he would be just confronting him, asking for the money, and by hook or crook, he snatches the money and goes away. And nobody in the street used to have the courage to say something against him, because he was so terrible and people are afraid of him. So naturally, your author is speaking, your narrator is telling, naturally I was of that type. I was a small boy. I didn't have sufficient courage to go against, even if I didn't approve of the behavior of Mr. Raid. Raid was a local gunda. He was powerful built, aggressive looking terrible, and what was doing? He was snatching away money from others. And he is also accompanied. He has his friends, and whenever he was moving, he is moving just like the sailor on the deck, all right? Just like on the sea, the sailor moves, and with all freedom, there is no one to check him. Likewise, he used to stand. Whenever he used to stand there, he used to keep his legs apart, all right? And exhibiting his wide chest, poke-marked fellow, and his, you can say, cap. So all these things added together in order to create a kind of a fearful picture around the locality. That's why no one has the courage to stand against him. So admittedly, your author says that I was also of that type. I was terrified. I was afraid of this man. I wanted to conquer my fear of raid. So this is the turning point. All right? This is the turning point. So all time he used to see this man, this Raid, a boy of 16, and he was a small child of 8 years. He used to see this kind of a thing, illegal things, and he was not appreciating this kind of thing. But that's why he thought that I should one day confront him. So you see how there was a kind of change in him, and to add to that, he has a knuckle duster. All right. So this is a kind of weapon like kind of thing. Let me just draw a picture. So he used to keep that thing in his pocket. Whenever he used to terrify somebody, he would be just taking out that you can say it's just like this knuckle duster, all right? So that you can hold like this and you can give punch, all right? So this becomes very terrible and terrifying, and very when you just confront another person and go for a kind of physical fight, this is very dangerous. If you give a kind of fist wearing this kind of knuckle duster, K-N-U-C-K-L-E, then duster. So knuckle duster. So there are also some modifications. So, in a picture you can find out, actually I have brought a picture where the knuckle duster has been fitted to a knife, and there are so many varieties, but because of technical kind of thing it cannot be shown, but you can imagine such a kind of thing that it fits into your hand, and whenever you go for a kind of fighting, that will add to your power. So he says that whenever he comes across any person, he used to keep this kind of thing ready to fight with other, and if he snatches the money and he succeeds, then there is no problem. If someone confronts him, then he used to go for a fight, exchange of fists, where with Mr. Reid is terrible. So I wanted to conquer my fear of Reid, so I wrote a poem about him. This was my first piece of journalism in verse. By the next day, the whole street knew it by heart and exulted with a trumpet hatred. So it looks somewhat funny that he decided to confront Mr. Reid. Who? Your narrator, that is Evtushenko. So instead of going for a fight, he wrote a small poem, almost, where he has criticized Mr. Reid. So when it was publicly, it was known and it was circulated there, people started reading it, and they developed a kind of a hatred towards Mr. Reid. Till now, Reid was invincible. All right. Mr. Reid was invincible. People thought that nobody can conquer Reid, nobody can defeat Reid. He is so invincible. Ajaya, whatever you say, Ajaya, invincible. So, for the first time in his mind, your author thought of a plan that I should go against this person. I should oppose the activities of Mr. Reid. But see, he was only 8 years old, small child. Nobody is there to protect him. No one is there, his friend. But on the other, you have Mr. Reid, a boy of 16, very powerful and having a kind of physical, you can say, physically he is looking very dangerous. A look which was aggressive looking. All right, he was looking very aggressive. So let us just see, all right, a kind of a comparison which will just give you some idea about this kind of thing, how he decided. So here you see your author, all right, author or the narrator, that is Evtushenko. So that's why he tells everything about his childhood using the I. I means he has explained those things, that's why he is telling these things. On the other, you have Reid. Reid is the nickname of that goon, the gunda. So the author was 8 years old, a small child, almost an orphan. Not an orphan, but there was a separation of his parents, so he was left as an orphan. All right. So rightly or wrongly, he was moving just like a street urchin. All right. So no formal education. Everything he has learned in a savvy manner, in a bad manner from the streets. On the other, Reid, physically very powerful, a boy of 16. All right, wide chested. All right, his chest was very wide, and there is poke mark. All right, poke mark dots on his face, wearing a cap and moving in a kind of manner just like the sailor on the deck. So that is how the author is describing him. So what was his business? His business was to snatch money from the passerby. Whenever somebody is passing on the road, he used to confront, terrify him, takes the money and then goes away. If there is some confrontation, he will just come out with his knuckle duster and then give him fists. Alright, so that there will be a physical fight, and since he is very powerful, nobody is there to oppose him, and he succeeds in his attempt. But the author wanted to just neutralize Reid. So instead of going for a fight, which he thought to be very impossible, he thought of writing a small poem, all right, describing, might be mimicking Mr. Reid or parodying some of his activities, something. It was satirical in tone. And when it was Reid there around, people started hating this Reid, but they didn't have sufficient courage to go against Mr. Reid. So let us see that how there was a kind of happening, a kind of incident which changed the entire course of his life. One morning on my way to school, I suddenly came upon Reid. It was just a kind of a chance meeting. All right. So his lieutenant's his eyes seemed to bore through me as if it will pierce into him. So since the author wrote that poem, it was widely circulated in and around, and Mr. Reid has read it, and that's why he was angry with the writer of that poem, that means the author. So he confronted him, asked, "So are you that poet? Are you that poet?" "Oh, the poet," he drawled, smiling crookedly. "So you write verses, do the rhyme." So it is just like, just to terrify, he says, "Oh, you are the poet who has talked about me. So you small child, only of 8 years, so small, you want to confront me." So see, Reid's hand darted into his, darted means quick movement. So he just spoke these things, and then suddenly, without spoiling any time, he just catch hold of his, you can say, the knuckle duster, and gave him a fist, F-I-S-T, fist, a kind of fist. So knuckle duster flashed like lightning and struck my head. He just that was very that gave him a kind of injury. I fell down streaming with the blood and lost consciousness. This was my past remuneration as a poet. Very sarcastically remarked that I wrote a poem just satirizing the habits of Mr. Reid. But Reid gave me such a blow on my head that he injured me, and perhaps that was the reward which I got by writing that poem. But see the determination in case of that poet, he says. So he wanted to conquer the sense of fear, even if I am physically not that powerful, not physically that well built like Mr. Reid. He says that one day or the other I shall see that he is not invincible. He is to be defeated somehow or the other. See the kind of moral courage in him. So strong determination. That's why he thought of his thing, that when he, next day whenever he sees, he just goes away. All right. So in fear, and then he thought of a plan. So that is important. He has to find out his own ways. So he has determined, he has just taken a vow to defeat Mr. Reid. That's why he took a decision how, even if he is not a powerful build, even if he is so weak compared to this powerful Reid, how he is to be defeated, how he would just conquer that sense of fear which is aroused whenever he sees Reid. So whenever on the road, on the street he sees Reid, there is a kind of inner kind of feeling as if he is afraid of him. So that's why he says that on that day I decided to conquer him, and I had taken the decision, and I said that he is not invincible, he can be defeated. So that's why he went for a kind of training. I went to do training with the parallel bars and weights after every session. So that's why he wanted to go for a kind of training for physical fight. So a kind of a Japanese art of self-defense. So in your you can say colleges, particularly government of Odisha has given a training to this girl students, self-defense training. All right, certain things, physical training is given by which you can defend yourself whenever you are in trouble. Likewise, this is also another art of defense. All right, art of defense. So this Japanese name, see the kind of spelling, it is JU-JITSU, Jujitsu, right? So this is another kind of Japanese training, right? So he attended that, spent some money, went for the training, and then he felt very confident that now I will be able to defend myself. I shall be able to protect myself. For the first time, he has instilled self-confidence into him. This particular kind of training in Jiu-Jitsu gave him that kind of confidence. So that is the kind of moral power. Moral power is superior to that of physical power. So as before, so now you can see that he wanted to confront. So see the kind of thing that even if he is a small boy of 8, he decided to confront. Went for some life lesson there, art of defense. He is trained in that art of self-defense, Jiu-Jitsu, got the training, felt confident, now decided to confront. So see the kind of encounter here. So this is the second encounter, which fear was still deep in me, urging me to go back, but I went up to the players and kicked and scattered the cards. It was something, a kind of surprise. So Red was there playing a kind of a card, just like some people in your village, they may be going for playing cards, right? Likewise, playing cards means tas, what is popularly known as Odia, tas khalo, right? Likewise, playing cards. So this is also another kind of a playing cards, and that is, the name is like this, VINGT, Vint et on. All right, this is another kind of card game. Card, C-A-R-D, card game. All right. So during this kind of playing, when your Raid was accompanied by his friends, they were all engaged in playing this Vect et Un. This is a kind of playing cards. Vint et Un. All right. This is the name of that kind of card. So suddenly, your boy Arthur was a small, you can say only 8 years old. He just went there, saw that all of them are engaged. They were playing cards. So he just went there, kicked them. All right. It was a kind of surprise move. All right. And Raid was taken aback. All right. He was surprised to see that how this boy who was moving away, running away from me, had the courage to give us a kick. So suddenly he stood up and he darted his hand. All right. With a quick movement, he just cut hold of that particular kind of knuckle duster, wanted to fight. All right. So it was too late. He got up slowly, you looking for more, he asked menacingly, as before his hands dived into his pocket, darted into his pocket. But your hero, actually Raid is not the hero, it is the author who is the hero here, only the boy of 8. So you see the kind of confidence, the kind of power which is derived by undergoing a kind of training in Jiu-Jitsu. So that gave him the confidence, that gave him the power, and he had just learned the strategy to defend himself. So he says, as before his hand dived into his pocket for the knuckle duster, but I made a quick jabbing movement, and howling with pain, rolled to the ground, bewildered. He got up and came swinging his head furiously from side to side like a maddened bull. See the kind of description. It is almost like lines from a poem, poetic lines. So it is just a kind of straight fight, all right, straight. He gave, when Raid holds the kind of knuckle duster, wanted to give him a kind of fist. At the same time, there was a jab, the author cut hold of him, all right, and it was so menacing that raid fell down. He was snatching the, you can say, he was just, he fell to the ground, all right, biting the dust. So he says, I caught his wrist and squeezed slowly. So it was just all the things which I have learned. So if you would have got hold of that kind of knuckle duster, it would have been very dangerous. But because of his quick movement, strategic, you can say, move, even if he is a small boy, he caught hold of the hands of Mr. Raid and saw that he fell to the ground. Nursing his hand, Raid fell down again. He was sobbing and smearing the streets over his pock-marked face with a gubby fist. Right? So you can see that he stood at that time. The author, who was a boy, stood to the ground, gave him a quick jabbing, you can say, fist, and twisted the hands of Raid, and he was the knuckle duster fell down, and Raid was defeated, fell onto the ground, and he was biting the dust. That day, Raid ceased to be the monarch of her state. So it is just like the summary, that till now in the locality everybody thought, everybody took for granted Raid was invincible. Nobody can stand against him, nobody can defeat him. But this boy of 8, the author himself, could prove that he is not invincible. He can be defeated. He can be defeated. And actually, he because of his moral courage, because of his training, he has learned the art of defeating in that kind of you can say physical fight. And that day, that incident took place, which changed the entire scenario, entire scene. And from that day on, I knew for certain that one need not fear the strong. So this is almost the moral, the central idea, that in this particular essay, in the small story, what the author wanted to prove or insist upon is this, that physical power is not the sole power. If you are very mentally alert, you have moral courage, you learn the lessons, and you can at time defeat the so-called invincible characters, invincible. And if you are on the right path, you can also defeat the person or the wrongdoer. That's why at the end of it, he says, for every strong man there is a special Jiu-Jitsu. Jiu-Jitsu is the Japanese martial art, like the training. So he says that this is the moral, that if a wrongdoer, even if you are so menacing, so threatening, you can be defeated. And you can be defeated by a person who is on the right, who gets the support of the society, and even if he is physically not that powerful, he can defeat the man who is on the wrong side. What I also learned on this occasion was that to be a poet, I had not only to write poems, but to know how to stand up for them, how to defend. So he is just referring to that small poem which he wrote about Raid, that when he wrote that poem, it was a satire. It was circulated in the locality. People started feeling a kind of sense of hatred towards Raid. So for that, Raid gave him a kind of fist on his head, and he was injured, and he took it as if that was the prize which I got when I wrote that poem. But now he could say and prove that physical power is not the sole power, moral power can overcome such situation. If you have learned the lessons of life, then you can also defeat persons, those who are wrongdoers. And even if you are not physically that powerful, you can also prevail over the persons because of your art, because of your training. So mind is more important than the physical attributes. So you see this, standing up for yourself, that he could stand up for himself. He has learned this lesson in from his life, and it is a kind of remembrance of the things past. What as a child he has learned, he has shared all these things with you. Possibly you find this piece to be very interesting. You can emulate these things in your day-to-day life. That even if he didn't have sufficient, you can say congenial atmosphere, he has learned the life's art in his own way, how to defend himself, how to protect himself. So really it is also the art, jiu-jitsu. He says there is a jiu-jitsu for all kinds of to counter all kinds of evil things. Thank you. Thank you.